Kara helps others reconnect with their spiritual nature to live with more clarity, purpose, and peace. She hosts the Elevation podcast, which I think I've been on about 3 times now, and I was just on there a couple months ago, ranked in the top 2% globally, featuring thought leaders, mystics, and visionaries to explore consciousness and human potential. Her book, Your Authentic Awakening, offers practical guidance for aligning with one's true essence, blending mystical insights with grounded tools for modern life. A certified energy healer and Reiki master, Kara's work spans meditation, energy healing, quantum transformation, and multidimensional awareness. She offers workshops, private sessions, and transmissions that clear energetic blocks and elevate frequencies while hosting online summits and events for deeper spiritual exploration. Hey, Kara, good to see you.
Hi, how are you?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Good. This has been amazing. I have just had so much fun. You've had such great speakers. I'm so honored to be a part of it, and the comments in the chat have just been remarkable as well. It's so great to see all the breakthroughs and everything. So I'm really
Yeah,
honored to be here.
I'm honored to have you here too. And yeah, it's been quite an activation, right, over these last 2 days. So many different transmissions. So I'm excited to see what you're going to be sharing with us today.
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, it's all yours.
Okay. So thank you everybody so much for being here. As Neil said, my name is Kara Goodwin. And I thought that since this is the Great Remembrance Conference, that I would begin with my awakening story, because we all have our awakening stories. And I know that yesterday we got into a lot of like releasing the story or rewriting our story. But we all do have kind of this origin story, and humanity is going through its own great awakening at the collective level, but that is all of our experiences that are coming together. And it can be a really tricky time when we're going through an awakening. So mine started coming up on about 10 years ago now, and it started through crisis. And one of the things that I've noticed through the hundreds of guests that I have interviewed on my podcast is that there are some major themes of how people come into their awakening. Typically, of course, not everybody, but when we start to see reality in a different way, and we start to come out of the mainstream mentality, and we start to see things, especially here in Western culture, where spirituality is not something that is part of our mainstream experience. It's something that people kind of do in the background, but we don't teach it in our regular schools, and it's not really a part of our media and things like that. We have this very materialistic view with our sciences and things of that nature. So a lot of times, there are different ways that people come into their awakening. We've heard a lot of near death experiencers during this conference, people who kind of have that sudden jolt where they have died. And then when they're on the other side in that time that they spend in a different realm, it changes everything that they know. We have people who start to experience ET contact. That can be another way that people start to kind of come out of the matrix. Disclosure and conspiracy, and is another way. Health crisis, that can be a way where people are dealing with a debilitating health issue for theirs or somebody that they're advocating for. They start to do some digging, and things stink. And they're like, wait a minute, this system is not what I thought it was. And should I trust this? And that can lead to a greater awakening. And then there is the life crisis. And that was my portal to awakening, um, was through life crisis. So again, it was coming up to 10 years ago. It started with the death of my sister-in-law. She took her life, and she was a very, very good friend of mine, very close friend, in addition to being my sister-in-law. And that was shocking and devastating. 3 weeks after that, our dog died, and a few weeks after that, my stepdad ended up in surgery on his brain stem. He had spinal stenosis. And so while we're kind of dealing with all of this, he was kind of going downhill pretty quickly. And then, when you're dealing with the brain stem with surgery on the brain stem, there are a lot of questions about what it's going to be like on the other side of that. Luckily, he is okay now. Meanwhile, a couple of weeks or a few weeks after that, my mother-in-law was hit by a motorcycle while she was crossing the street. So she ended up in the hospital for quite a while, recovering from that. And then my stepmom ended up in the ICU with a failing heart and went to the top of the heart transplant list and had a heart transplant the day after Thanksgiving of that year. So this all started at the beginning of May, and we had the heart transplant at the end of November. And so all of that was happening while I was living abroad in Italy with my husband and 2 kids. And so my family's in the US, my husband's family's in England. And so as all of these things are surfacing, all these crises are happening, we can't even really very easily be with family. We've got our life, our kids are going to school, my husband's going to work in Italy, and we can't really even be be present with our family as they're going through it and as we're going through it together. We want to comfort them and we want to be comforted. We want to be with our family in that time of need. And that was hard too, you feel like you might as well be on another planet when you're, that far away. So as that was happening, I got to the point really where every time my phone rang, I was, could feel this anxiety rise. And I was like, I don't even want to answer my phone, because when you get a phone call, when I was going through this, anytime I was getting a phone call, it was really bad news, because people didn't want to text bad news. So, particularly, if it was during the week or something, you see the phone ring and it's like, oh my gosh, what could this be? And so I realized that I was kind of sinking, and I needed a life preserver. And so I learned meditation, and there's a whole story to do with that. But I had been drawn to meditation for a long time, and I had tried it, but I had never really gotten serious about it, and I hadn't really gotten anywhere with it. But when I really felt that I was sinking, I was like, I'm gonna find a teacher. I'm gonna really dive into meditation and utilize this. But I went from a very secular perspective. I didn't go to nurture my spirit. I wasn't really wanting on the conscious level to have any sort of spiritual experience. I just wanted to feel calmer. And as all of this was happening, also, actually before these crises started, it's interesting to look back, because it wasn't until years later that I realized that there was something that happened to my health, if we want to think about it like that, even before these cascading events happened. And that was something that was happening with my sight. So I remember that we were driving up to the mountains. We were going to go skiing. So I know it was in February. And I used to get ocular migraines for years. Probably by that time, about 15 years. I would get them multiple times a year. And an ocular migraine is when the primary symptom is visual. You can see some sort of obstruction in your vision, or like some waves in the vision. And then there might be an accompanying headache. And for me, often what would happen is primarily it would be the visual, but I would feel this, like I'd get a screaming headache, but it would just last for like a few seconds, and then it would stop. And then it would come back, but just for a few seconds. But it would be like if I was talking to somebody, I would have to like hold my head just for those few seconds. It was intolerable, but then it would pass very quickly. But that was always my symptom. Well, there's my dog. I don't know if you guys can see my dog back there. You were supposed to be a secret. So we were driving up to the mountains, and I started to get this obstruction in my vision. And it looked to me, it's always in the peripheral vision, but it was like this checkerboard pattern, and it was circular, and it was rotating. And it was almost like in quadrants, like a circle, but broken into 4 parts. And I remember even telling my husband when we went to, get some gas, I was like, "Oh, I what timing?" I think I'm getting a migraine because I've got this, obstruction in my vision, and so I was kinda worried that I was gonna be having a headache, and with the altitude and everything, I was just sort of like, that wasn't great timing. But that I never got the headache, but the visual was with me for months. And what as it happened, in April, I finally said, "I really should have this looked at because I never got like, this obviously it's not a migraine, and it's not going away, and it's been here for now, like, 2 months, so there's something going on with my vision." And I started wondering if there was something going on with my brain. And so I had a friend who was, her husband was an optometrist. She actually happened to be an optometrist too, but she wasn't practicing at that time. And her husband got me into the hospital. And it just so happened that my appointment, like between when she made the appointment and when my appointment actually happened, my sister in law took her life. And so I had this kind of really important appointment to see what was going on with my eyes or my brain. And my sister-in-law passed away the day before. So my husband went up to England to be with his family right away, and I stayed behind to have this appointment. And I remember sitting there waiting for the doctor in the hospital thinking, my husband just lost his sister. Are they going to tell me I have a brain tumor? Like how is my husband going to do this? It was just, and so I didn't have a brain tumor. They thought that there was something going on with some part of my eye. They were convinced it was from a virus, that they said I would have these certain symptoms, and I had not had those symptoms, but they were like, well, that's what it is, and it's fine. And I think I found some sort of supplement that was supposed to target that area of the eye. And eventually, over a few weeks or a couple months, that phenomenon with the vision went away. And so because I was kind of in panic mode for a lot of that year, I once that went away and I didn't see it anymore, I didn't worry about it. And then years later, I reflected on that. And if you know anything about the pineal gland, there can be an activation process that's part of the awakening, a part of your spiritual awakening. And so when I look back at that and I know that there is this visual phenomenon, and I know that the characteristics of it, like that black and white checkerboard pattern, those can all be pointing to a pineal gland awakening. And so I share that with you because there can be some physical symptoms that show up as you go through your own personal awakening process. And it may be that you don't recognize it as it's happening because you're not in that world yet, right? So, like before I started meditating, and even once I started meditating, I really wasn't going the spiritual path yet. Um, and so I was looking at everything from like a physical material world perspective. And then it was interesting to look back later to notice the timing. Like this happened right before I went through a very challenging, like I think of it as a portal that I went through, or a birth canal. There was so much pressure. There was so much pressure. And I was a different person when I came through those challenges. Um, so as we go through our awakening, and so then, to close that story out, I got into meditation, and again, I was even though I was taught by monks how to meditate, I was still very cautious about like praying before I meditate. I really just wanted that calmness and that peace. And I wasn't so sure about praying before I meditated and kind of the spiritual lineage that they were, wanting to usher me into. I was kind of like, nah. But then when I was meditating, I sometimes would have experiences like having, just doing a maybe 15, 20-minute meditation. And I just remember this one afternoon where I was doing that, and then this light, like this golden light, just descended down. And my eyes were closed, but it was like I could see this light coming from above and coming down, and it felt like I was just, you know, eh, absorbing this light, or actually it felt like this light was being bestowed upon me, being rained down on me. And I wept. I was so moved by that because I didn't feel that it was me who did that. I just was in an open and receptive state. So through little things like that, I then started to open up and think, okay, maybe there's another dimension to this meditation. Maybe there is a spiritual aspect to life that I want to connect with it. And then from that opening, now with my meditation practice, I mean, that's the heart of my practice, is connecting to my higher self, connecting to my oversoul, connecting to my divine team. And it's all spirit now. um but it didn't start that way. So when we're going through some sort of awakening, there can be a lot of ways, it can be a really exciting time because we're starting to see the world in a new way, and we're starting to understand things, and we want other people to wake up too. And this can be tricky territory. And I'm curious, some of you may relate to this. You may have gone through this in your own journey. But a lot of times, because we start to discover something and it feels like it's true and that we have been living in an illusion, and we really want the people that we love to benefit from it. So we may start taking every opportunity to try to tell them what is going on, and to try to, point out what they're doing that is working against them, and how everything is vibration and energy, and they're doing things that are lowering their vibration. And so that's something to be aware of as part of that process of awakening, is that it might be a very good hearted intention that you want to share and you don't want to leave anybody behind. But what can very easily happen that you want to be careful about is that not everybody's ready to hear it. And even if your intentions are really good and pure, it can come across as an attack, or it can make people defensive just because, you're kind of threatening the way that they've been thinking and their beliefs. So it's something to keep an eye on, and it's important for you to understand, or for all of us to understand, that the real change that we make to the external is through changing ourselves. And I know that this is, a bumper sticker type of territory, like be the change you want to see in the world, as Gandhi said, which is beautiful sentiment, but it's not hard to, you probably come across that a lot. Be the change, be the change. And there is that philosophical aspect to that where, we role model for others, but there is also an energetic component to that. And that's what I want to dive into, because I have had some metaphysical or mystical experiences where I have perceived energy, and I have perceived light and frequencies, and seen this symbolized in such a really beautiful way. And it really drove the point home to me. And so, with one of those experiences, so for me, the way that these types of experiences typically happen is when I am falling asleep at night. So you may be aware that there is this in-between state between being awake and being asleep, and it's called the hypnagogic state when you're falling asleep. And you also have it when you're waking up. I think it's called the hypnopompic state. I think I said that right. But for me, the hypnagogic state is the really fertile time. And so I'm not dreaming, I'm fully awake, but seeing I'm seeing energy, I'm seeing colors and patterns. For me, especially early on, a lot of the things I was seeing were geometries. Um, I now know that as sacred geometry. I didn't know that when I was first seeing them. But um, this one particular time that really drove home the importance of the work that we do on ourselves was shown to me as my body kind of dissolved from my perspective. So I'm again, like I'm transitioning into sleep, but my body starts to dissolve, or my body awareness starts to dissolve. And what I start seeing are all of these tiles, let's call them tiles. And they were different colors and different, I think they were pretty much rectangular, but it was like I was looking up at a tunnel, and it was all these pretty tiles. And the tiles, I could also see that everybody that I'm connected with, they also have tiles, and we share tiles where we overlap. So, the people that I see all the time, and, maybe family members that I share some genetics with and things like that, we may have a lot of tiles that overlap. And then I might have people who I'm not as close with, but we have touch points, and then we may share like a few tiles. And again, this is all symbolic, but um and then I saw that through my choices, I can change the colors of my tiles. And this relates to vibrational frequency. So through the choices that I make, I can raise my vibration, which changes the color of my tiles. And what I actually saw is that in this experience, I raised my vibration high enough that all the tiles turn golden. And so now instead of looking at these multicolored tiles, I'm looking at these golden tiles. But I share a lot of tiles with other people. And so as that happened, the tiles that we share also go golden. And then it starts to sort of create this gradient into their tile energy structure. So the tiles that we share turn golden, but it also starts to communicate to the tiles that aren't related to me, right? Or that we don't share, but it's like this intelligent light. So they start kind of communicating. It starts to light up their tiles. And then, it's up to them what they do with that. But it showed this coherence and this communication, this energetic communication that we're having with each other that goes beyond words. And so from this perspective, it doesn't really matter if I change their mind about something, because not only am I possibly modeling behavior that they may eventually become, convinced of the value of, let's say meditation, for example. Maybe they've seen me meditate for years and they've seen the change in me, and that maybe will inspire them to change. But even beyond that, there is this energetic exchange that's happening where when I'm holding a certain frequency, it's communicating with them and it is affecting their field. And there's this resonance between us. And so, of course, I'm using myself as an example here, but this is happening with all of our communications. Excuse me. I thought that a visual would be helpful. And so I wanted to try, I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see how this goes. Please bear with me for a second. Okay, can you see this? Can somebody just give me like a yes, or Neil, if you're there? Can you see this screen that I'm sharing? It's two people who look like tiles. Okay, wait, I see something in private chat. Um, okay. No, you can't see it. Okay. Thank you, Rosemary. Okay, let me try one more thing here. And I'm just going to see if it will do. Well, darn it. Maybe it's not going to work. Okay. I'll try one more thing, guys. Sorry. Okay. I'm trying one more thing. I know you couldn't see it before. Any chance that you can see it now? I selected one different thing. It's saying not yet. Okay. All right. Well, darn it. You're going to have to use your imaginations. I'm sorry about that. But I did create a little image to try to show two people who have tiles, and it's they're sharing, and hopefully you get the idea. So this leads me to another experience that I wanted to share that kind of relates to, I think it was Alyssa from today who was sharing about her near death experience. And somebody asked, um, how our physicality comes here and how we, create our experience. And I got so excited when I saw that question. She talked about the hologram and the fans. Do you guys remember that? Um, so I have also had an experience and that illustrated this. And what is really interesting with these types of experiences is sometimes I will see something and I'll think, oh, this is how it works. And then I'll see a totally different way that explains the same thing. And that's what I was thinking of when Alyssa was talking about these holographic fans and the codes. And it was like, oh, this is so close, closely related to what I'll explain here. But um, I saw that at first I just was in this void. So again, this is the hypnagogic state. And I feel like I'm in space and I'm just kind of floating and there's nothing around. And suddenly what starts coming into focus are these thin golden, not thin silver lines. And they're huge. And I realized that as they're taking shape, that they're gears and they're moving and they're, communicating with each other the way that gears do. And then, and they're kind of in a in a vertical pattern, like they're upright like this. And then there are all these gears moving. And then I start to see this galaxy. Well, it reminded me of a galaxy. And this is something that I have seen from the very early days of starting a meditation practice. I have seen this spiraling galaxy. It looks like you're really, really far zoomed out on the galaxy, because you probably have seen this, in just being human. We run across the image of the rotating galaxy. I remember I saw that early on in my meditation experiences in my mind's eye, and I was so confused because I was like, why am I seeing space, or why am I seeing the galaxy? Like, I wasn't really interested in astronomy or astrology. And And now, I've really embraced the star seed aspect of myself. So now it makes sense. But then it was like a head scratcher. Um, so anyway, I'm seeing this spiraling galaxy, and then I'm also seeing these moving gears that are up and down, but the spiraling galaxy is horizontal. And then I see that I I see kind of me. Now I'm like in that, and I can see that it's like a grid. So if you think of when you took algebra class in high school and you worked with grids, and you had your y-axis, which was the up and down, and you had the x-axis, which was the horizontal. And so the horizontal was space, because that was the galaxy, and the vertical was time. Those were the gears. And I'm like in this grid, and there's a z-axis. So the z-axis is like what is projected out. So the z-axis is when you start to get into the third dimension with when in math. And the way that the z-axis, it's like wherever my body is, it's some coordinate of these x and y axis. It's somewhere plotted on this x and y axis of space and time. And then the z-axis is reality, and reality is actually being created through my eyes. And what's interesting, I think it was yesterday, somebody, or maybe it was this morning, I can't remember, but there was a speaker who talked about this, and I wish I could remember. I've watched so many of these now, and I'm so sorry for whoever did bring this up, and I'm not able to credit them, but they were talking about how, we think about that we are observing reality, but we are creating it. And what I could see in this experience was that our eyes are like reality is being projected through our eyes, and our vibrational frequency is bending the light to create our reality. And what that means is that the vibrational frequency that we're holding is creating our experience. It's creating even what we see. And again, we can take this back to the philosophical component of, we create our reality with our vibration, with our thoughts, with our observations. What we choose to focus on is what grows, right? What we appreciate appreciates. All of these things I'm sure you have heard. So why is gratitude so important? For example, I'm sure you have heard of the benefits of gratitude and how much that can shift your frequency, help to shift you in a higher frequency. When you practice gratitude, you're looking. So let's say you're keeping a gratitude journal, for example, and you have this task that before you go to sleep each night, you are going to write X amount of things that you're grateful for. And they can't be the same things that you said yesterday or the day before. You have to think of new things that happened in the day that you're grateful for. And so you have to replay your day, and you have to look at your day in the lens of gratitude. So maybe you had not a very nice day, but you have to reflect on your day to find those things that you actually are grateful for. And what happens over time, if you practice this day after day after day, is that you're not waiting until the end of the day to find the things to be grateful for. You have trained yourself to find things to be grateful for as you're living your life. You are changing how you see your reality. You are changing your creation. You're changing the way that the light bends when you look at your reality. So your reality is your creation. You can notice anything at any given moment. There are a plethora of things that you can pay attention to. at any given moment. And it's up to you to decide what gets your energy and your attention. Are you going to focus on the things that annoy you? Are you going to focus on the past hurts that are still unresolved? Are you going to figure out what you don't like about somebody? Or are you going to be looking for those things that lift you up? And that literally changes your energetic vibration, your energetic vibrational frequency. There have been some transmissions today where the speaker has had us feel that vibration. To, I think it was Dr. Lisa was having us feel like we went into the DNA, and then we were in our bodies, we were in the cells, and we were vibrating them faster. And that is true. You are literally doing this. You are vibrating at a certain rate. So when you engage with things like gratitude, you are vibrating faster. And that will literally change what you see, how you see, and how you create. Because really, what you're observing is what you're creating. It's all happening at once. So, so this is a way that we become more conscious in our creations. And another piece to awakening that has come up several times in these talks, and which Neil is having his workshop on, or his class series on soon, is the shadow. And I know that a lot of speakers have already talked about the shadow. I feel that 2025 for me and a lot of the people that I interact with, 2025 has been a big shadow year. It's been a big year where the shadow is like, I'm here, guys, and you have not been paying attention to me, and it is time for you to see me. And as I've gone along in my journey, the shadow has not typically, in fact, Neil and I talk about this in the episode that he was on recently. I share about how I was very much a love and light kind of practitioner. I didn't want to focus on the shadow because I didn't want to feed it. And so I thought if I just kind of didn't dig up those wounds, I would be better off. And what I have found this year is that the wounds show up. They're like, we need to be seen. And so the way that this has come about for me, as an example, is it's some things have come up through dreams where I have a dream about somebody, and then I think about that dream as I'm going through my morning, and I realize that I still have hard feelings about that person, and I don't want to have those anymore. So I want to work on that. I want to bring that to the surface and reconcile that and heal that. But in order to heal it, I have to see it first. I have to acknowledge that it's there. So I've had dream gifts as I see them of like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that I hadn't completely resolved that. Let me go into that and let me look about it. Let me look at it. Let me think about it. Let me love into that. Let me forgive that. Let me ask ask through consciousness for forgiveness myself. Help me to forgive this. And but there was a really interesting one that came up. I don't think this one was through a dream. All of a sudden, I think it was actually in the hypnagogic state. I was, and I don't even remember. Maybe I was in a void again. I can't remember exactly what was happening, but I was in some sort of metaphysical, energy, where I'm seeing things. And usually those experiences feel really good and I enjoy them. They're at least entertaining. And this memory came up. And the memory actually was from high school. And it was that I had a good friend who mutual friends had what's the word, planned a surprise party for her and didn't invite me. And it was a curious thing because I was friends with her and I was friends with the people who had planned it. And I didn't really know, I knew about the party, but I didn't really know why I hadn't been invited. And one of those curious things that happens in these types of things is I had asked my mom, I couldn't drive yet. So I'd asked my mom to take me to the mall so that I could get her birthday present. And I didn't tell my mom that there was a party I wasn't going to, but she was my friend. So I mean, I think she had gotten me a birthday present when it was my birthday. So I was getting her a birthday present just to give her, on a day that wasn't her party. And it just so happened that we ran into her and her mom while I was trying to shop for her presents. So we stop and talk, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm here getting your present. Good thing I'm seeing you now and not, in a few minutes." And her mom is talking to my mom and saying, "Oh, you guys better leave soon," because she doesn't know I'm not invited. And she says, "You guys better leave soon because we're leaving and you're gonna miss the surprise." And so they leave, and my mom's and I are walking, wherever, and she says, why didn't you tell me that Jennifer's having a party?" And I was like, "Because I'm not invited." And I burst into tears. And that was the last time I ever talked about that. That was as much as I ever said about it. And I buried that because I was so hurt and embarrassed and confused. And I didn't blame her because she hadn't been the one to plan it. So she hadn't been the one to leave me out. And then I, didn't want to be awkward with anybody. So I just, quickly buried that and literally forgot about it for over 20 years, over 30 years. And then I'm having this like nighttime experience and I'm just kind of flying around or whatever it is that I'm doing. And all of a sudden I'm like, bam, that memory comes up. And I'm like, oh my God, I completely forgot about that. How how have I gone this long, over 30 years, and I have never thought about that? And my initial reaction was to forget about it again as quickly as I could. I caught myself, but I was like, what is that doing here? I was having a good time. I don't want to think about that. That hurts. That was embarrassing. That's not going to get me anywhere. And I noticed, wait, I'm afraid of this. I am afraid to feel what this is going to make me feel. And it was very interesting how the next day, somebody actually for Christmas, this was back in January of this year, for Christmas, a friend of mine had given me a book on internal family systems. And the next day, I just so happened to be holding that book because it was going to be the next book I was going to read. I had no idea in fact, I thought I knew what it was, what IFS was, but it was a different thing than even what I thought it was. And I never got a chance to even crack the book open because there was so much activity going on in my house. So I go back, or the next day I meet a friend for coffee, different friend, and I tell her about this story and I tell her how I could tell there was this part of me that was still wounded and that was almost like stuck at that age. And I hadn't been able to look at her, to like acknowledge her, and I just froze her. And that's just energy that I don't have access to because I'm denying it. And so I'm telling her about this. She said, "Oh, this sounds like internal family systems." And I'm like, "What did you just say?" I'm like, "I can't believe you just said that." I was just holding this book last night. And so I read this book and it's all about this. And so this was a great opportunity. It gave me some tools to be able to kind of love and integrate this part of myself. But there have been a few experiences like this that I've gone through in 2025, and what I have learned is that the exactly what I just said with what I had done with that aspect of myself where I was hurt and I was afraid of that experience. I was afraid of being embarrassed. I was afraid of being hurt. And so I just said, "You go over here, and I don't want to have anything to do with you." And then she tried to show herself, and I tried very quickly to bury her again until I realized, but that is energy. We have these fragmented parts of ourselves, And it is frozen energy. And when we have frozen energy in our field, in our system, it can create blockages. It can create places where energy can't flow freely. That can create emotional issues, relationship issues, but it can even manifest physically. It can come into our physical body and create disease, dis-ease. And so it is important that we recognize the role of the shadow and we don't dismiss it, because it kind of creates a glass ceiling for us on our in our spiritual development when we start to think, um, I'm only going to accept what feels loving. I'm only going to accept the parts of me that are vibrating at a certain rate, that are full of forgiveness, that aren't angry. We don't actually dissolve those shadow parts of ourselves when we're not willing to look at them. We bury them. And so they're still there, but we don't have access to all of ourselves. And so it's definitely has been a really striking experience and lesson for me. And I encourage you to think about and to pay attention, because your dreams or your life. Another funny aspect of this whole thing with this party and the memory coming up is that I'm not really on Facebook very much, and I don't get the alerts like when somebody posts on my wall. And I specifically have to be like, I have to have my phone open and for me to get the notification. And I saw this notification come up, and it was one of the girls who had planned the surprise party. So she's been had been top of my mind with all of this, reconciling all of this. And I mean, we've been friends on Facebook for a long time, but she posted something on my wall. Nobody ever posts anything on my wall. So, because I'm just not on there. And for me to be able to see it, it had to be just the right timing of when she did it and when I would see it. And it was like, of all of the people who could have posted it, that it was her. And that's our only kind of method of communication. We don't have each other's phone numbers or anything like that. So all of this just seemed like the universe saying, like, okay, we're going to hold you through this, but it is time for you to go through this. So there can be a lot of whispers from the universe of setting things up in a supportive way for you to be able to start to see your shadow and start to work with your shadow. And of course, if you're dealing with like really hard, heavy trauma, because my trauma, that was not fun for me, but that's not like hardcore trauma. But, get some help. If you need somebody to help you process that, you might want to speak with a therapist or speak with a healer or work with somebody that you trust who can kind of hold your hand through that if you're dealing with something that is really, really hard to face. But I do feel that the time is now. It's part of the ascension, it's part of the awakening. And so if you're still in a place where you see it all as love and light, and you don't want to go into anything that's going to make you feel lower for a period of time, you want to think about that and look at that and consider what you may be holding yourself back from. So I think I might have overrun. I'm sorry, Neil. I don't know if you're on there, but
No, you did great. You have a couple more minutes since we're running late, but
oh,
no, that was
okay.
beautiful.
Well, I wanted to mention that Neil is going to be my guest on the Galactic Summit, which is August 2nd. So I've got
Mhm.
10 great speakers. Kimberly Meredith, if she's still on here, I saw her in the comments. She's another amazing speaker. This is August 2nd, which is a Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern. 10 amazing speakers. We're going to be talking about the convergence of galactics, our ET connections, and spirituality, and how these things go together and inform each other. So I hope that you'll join us for that. It's free, or you can upgrade to the VIP package, which is an amazing package. So
Thank you so much, Kara. And where can people sign up for that?
on karagoodwin.com, and I'll put the link in here. You can get to all of I've got also like 160 some podcasts out there under Soul Elevation. You can, that's soulelevationpodcast.com. And I've got a lot of other resources on karagoodwin.com. So I will put the links in there when I wrap up here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kara, and thank you for just the message and just your journey and sharing it so vulnerably, and the whole thing of just seeing things come up for yourself and pushing it away for so long. And on some level, it seems like the more we push things away, the more they come back with a vengeance later in life.
Yes.
They just compile on top of each other, right? And then you could be 40, 50, 60 years old and then think you've worked through a lot of stuff, and all of a sudden all these things that you haven't processed are coming out to be experienced. And because we're in this time of quickening, can't take our baggage to this new reality, it's almost like we're being, what used to take lifetimes or days for us to experience, we're getting like those lessons every single hour, right? Constant
Yes.
reminders. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So well said.